and welcome back to Nolan Financial Radio. My name is Tara Nolan from Nolan Financial Partners. If you are new to the show, welcome. We are going to be talking today about the danger of financial assumptions. And I think we all know what happens when you assume.
It
makes something out of you and me.
Yeah, you don't have to say it. Don't say it.
I won't say it.
Family friendly.
This is a family show. But for those of you who are new, this is an educational program, and my co-host and I, Tony, we do a lot of topics ranging from Social Security to IRAs to 401ks to Medicare, all these different financial topics. So I would encourage you, if you have a question that pops up during the show, you can feel free to give my husband and my partner, Chris, and I a call at 719-210-4242, or you can contact us online at www.nolanfinancialpartners.com. While you're at my website, click on the radio page because we do record these shows and we have lots of educational topics so you can get caught up. And you can also subscribe on Apple Podcast or Google Play. So really encourage you to take a minute to go and do that, because financial success begins with being able to ask good questions. Because there's so much information out there. There's no lack of information. The challenge is saying, what information applies to me personally?
Yeah.
And that's where we want to get to. But before we jump into the show too much, let me touch base with Tony. Tony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I just want to clarify something. Technology changes so fast. It's Spotify now instead of Google Play. Google Play as itself doesn't exist, but so many of our listeners now are on Spotify, Tara, and they can just find the show by putting in Nolan Financial, Tara Nolan, Tara, Nolan Financial Radio, either one, and it'll pop up there, and it's on Apple Music and or Apple Podcasts, I should say. And so I think it's great, and you have all these avenues and resources for our listeners out there. But yeah, pick up the phone. I know, Tara, you love to hear from our listeners, and you've even listeners say, talk about this. And so we use that topic. And so people need to know, and we give financial tips. But I've been great, had a great week. Just as usual, just like last week, kept busy. So staying out of trouble that way. But Tara, how have you been? What's going on there? Is Chris doing okay?
Chris is doing amazing. And I'm very excited when I do my first trip to Germany for my new reserve job. He's going to come with.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He's going with. And you guys are kind of, hopefully you'll have time a day or two to go do some sightseeing there.
I think so. So it'll be interesting. You know, we've got all of our vaccinations done. And I think, when we get over there, you have to go over to the pharmacy and register. So it'll be part of the adventure. But,
yes.
And I've asked Chris, so while I'm working his task, he's got to have a to-do list while we're there. He can't just be hanging out.
You can't give him any time off.
I'm going to have him read the book. So the book has gone to the copy editor, but I've specifically kept Chris aside as a fresh set of eyes. So he's going to go through and read everything and make sure, all the examples are as they should be. Because, when you're writing, you reach this point where you don't see the mistakes anymore because your brain just goes, well, this is what I meant.
Yeah. Your brain fills it in. Our brains fill it in, and that's how so many typos get missed, even in professional publications on major publishers. We were talking about that earlier. I always find that fascinating when I read a lot, and when I'm reading like a paperback novel, a mystery or a thriller, by even major authors, and I see a typo in the book, like the word "the" is twice. And I'm like, how in the world did, Simon & Schuster or whatever major publisher it's on, I'm not picking on them, but, it's just like, how was this missed, in a major book, and I caught it? Well, they've had multiple eyes on that, and they all missed it because our brain just goes right over it. Right.
Yeah. So so it's very interesting. I love the process because it just keeps making the communication better. And and it's helping me remember, like, you forget what you know and what everybody else doesn't know.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh wait, that's not common knowledge. So I need to explain that.
Yeah.
But that kicks us right into what we're going to talk about today, Tony, is I want to talk about these financial assumptions that people make. And it's really interesting as I'm going through this process of writing the book, because I've been talking to a lot of people and I've interviewed people. And one of the first ones I have to talk about is, Tony, there's this assumption that if you work hard and you work until you're about 65, a retirement's going to be there for you. And I can tell you, I was talking with a doctor the other day, Tony, and he was like, I feel so stupid because I went to med school and I went to residency and I built my practice and I've just been working and taking care of all these people. I just kind of thought in the back of my head that the retirement will just be there. And Tony, and it's fascinating because he's not alone. I talked to a lot of different people, and it's just kind of, it's that shift from where there used to be pensions.
Yeah.
And now there's not pensions anymore.
Yeah.
Except for very few, maybe some government jobs. There's very few actual pensions. And the places that have pensions, it's a little bit of money, but it's not enough to live on totally.
Right.
And so there's this huge, dangerous financial assumption, Tony, that people think that there's going to be a retirement available when they're 65.
Mm.
And so, and that kind of leads right into that next thing of, and I know we've talked about this a lot, is Social Security is not a pension.
Yes, no, it's not. It's not. And it's not your, people think, well, when I retire, I'll have money because I'll have Social Security. Well, you might have less because they're going to have to make some serious changes to Social Security here over the next few years. Plus, Social Security, even where it's at, even if you've, even at the maximum amount, the maximum anybody could ever make off Social Security, I think now the number is like $3,700, but nobody's actually getting that. It's usually between $1,000 and $2,400 or something that most people would get a month, and that's if they're lucky. So I think that's really you can't count on it. You can't rely on it. I mean, it needs to be the foundation. I mean, when you get your number, that's what you're going to get, and you can count on that. But you're going to need something else on top of it, and it's not a pension. It's not something that it does pay you out monthly for the rest of your life, but it's not a very big amount, and it's not meant for you to be able to live on that, right?
It's not, Tony. And so it's nice to have. And I always say I say it in quote marks, it's a great annuity because you don't have to, your health doesn't matter. You're going to get your money. Yep. So it doesn't matter if you have diabetes or cancer or you're a smoker. You don't have to pass a medical exam. So It is going to be some money, but it's not going to be enough to live on. And so that's a very dangerous assumption that I find a lot of people make. And then, Tony, that kind of leads to the next assumption in the same vein is a lot of people feel like, well, I've got my 401k at work. Yep. And that's going to be my retirement.
Yep. And I think that's a majority of people today who are working today have 401ks. The majority of people, that's their retirement vehicle, a 401k, 403b, or traditional IRA, very similar. And they think, I've got that, no problem.
And here's why it happens. And here's why it's a dangerous assumption, because, my grandfather in that generation, Tony, they had pensions. You went and you worked for a company and you worked for 35 years and you got a pension. And so what happened?
You got the gold watch, a retirement party, and a pension.
Exactly.
Those days are gone, aren't they, Tara?
They are. But here's the thing that happened is, so a pension got replaced by a 401k, but the mentality of our country hasn't shifted. So a lot of people still go, well, I'm going to work for 35 years and I'm going to get a retirement. And they didn't process that a 401k is different than a pension.
Yes.
And so people get to the end and they're like, yeah, well, I've got my 401k. And here's the assumption is that they think that the 401k is going to be like a pension. And it's the difference, Tony, between a defined contribution and a defined benefit plan. And so a pension is a defined benefit. So when you used to get a pension, you would get your $5,000-$6,000 a month, whatever it was. And that's how much you got every month. Forever. So you didn't have to worry about it. That came. Yeah. A defined contribution plan, which is what a 401k is, means you put the money in, and then what you're able to take out is how well it's done in the market.
Yeah.
So it can go up and down. So there's no guarantee that you're going to be
Minus
able to
what you owe
pull.
to Uncle Sam if it's a traditional 401k.
Exactly. So you have the tax burden, and then there's no guarantee in what you're going to make, and that's what makes it so nebulous. And why, Tony, the visual I want people to get in their head is like this bubble, this financial bubble, and everything that you have financially is inside of that bubble. So, and think about it, your 401k is one thing out of about, for me, Tony, about 27 different decisions you're making financially that I look at, because you have your insurance, your annuities, your bank accounts, your real estate, your all these different things that go inside your financial bubble. The 401k is one of them, and Tony, it's not guaranteed. And so people assume that they just, in their head, they just say, well, 401k, and that checks the box for that's my retirement. And the fallacy of the assumption, where it gets a little scary, is it is part of your retirement, but do you know how to manage it? Do you know how it's growing? What happens if the market does a dive while you're retired? How are you going to protect yourself from that? So there's all these other things that you have to consider. And so this assumption that it's just there and it's taking care of itself. That's the problem, is people kind of go 401k, it's on autopilot. I don't have to think about it. It's just going to be there.
Yeah. And that's a huge misconception. And I think that people, when they come to the realization, or they start talking to somebody like yourself, the concern is, wow, okay, my 401k is a limited amount of money, and it's not a guaranteed lifetime income. A 401k is not that. So what happens if I run out of money? And I know that we've talked about it on the show before. There are numerous articles out there that say that's the number one concern of pre-retirees and retirees, is running out of money. That's number one. And healthcare costs are probably number two if they're wise. So, you have to deal with that. And I think before we go on and talk more about that, Tara, how can our listeners get a plan in place so they know their money will last as long as they do? I mean, they need a plan. And I know you and Chris are offering a complimentary consultation to get a plan in place for our listeners out there.
Yes, Tony. So we definitely do that, because we do this holistic plan where we look at like over 27 different aspects. Whatever's working, we leave alone, but where the holes are, that's what we start to fill in. And so that's where the plan gets exciting. But Tony, the number is 719-210-4242. That's 719-210-4242. You can also connect with us via the website, www.nolanfinancialpartners.com. But set up that complimentary call, because we'll sit there and we'll look at what you're doing and how we can help and see if it's going to be a good fit. Because Tony, everybody that takes a plan and gets it down on paper always exceeds or achieves their goals, versus the people that just keep it kind of in their head or they put it off later. A lot of times that hope strategy, I don't see it work so well.
Yeah. And I've heard it put, Tara, hope so money versus no so money, right?
Yes.
Hope so money, not so good. No so money is great. So, and that's the tough thing when you're dealing with things other than Social Security and pensions, which are guaranteed forms of lifetime income. Social Security being on shaky ground. Pensions, most of them have gone the way of the pension or the buffalo, whichever you choose, because they're gone. Most people don't have pensions, and they're not exactly the same or as sturdy as they used to be, even when you do get a pension. So it's important to have an overall strategy in place. So I'm glad you said that. And what's that number one more time?
Sure, Tony. That number is 719-210-4242.
All right. Well, and this is great. And we're talking about the dangers of financial assumptions here. And people make a lot of them. I used to. I mean, I made assumptions about Medicare and about taxes in retirement that weren't true. And we talked a little bit on our last show about taxes. The assumptions people make about taxes in retirement is that they'll have little to no tax in retirement. And that's another big assumption people make, isn't it?
Tony, it's a huge assumption. And I really like this example, and I heard it when I was younger, is don't be angry if you have to pay taxes, because it means you're making money. And
I like that. That's true.
and
That is
I
true.
carry that analogy through because if we have done our retirement planning well, you should have money in retirement. Or the goal is not to make you so poor that you qualify for Medicaid.
Mhm.
But here's the thing, though, is what we want to do is we want to grow your money, grow that nest egg for retirement, and we want to get as much of it as possible into tax-free vehicles. Because here's why, Tony, is then when your money is inside of a tax-free vehicle, you don't care what Congress is doing. You're able to make your decisions for your life because you know your money is your money.
Yeah, that's huge. Oh man, that Terry, I love that because that is so true, and that's so important. That's huge. Not having to worry about what's happening in Congress because it's
Oh
in a
gosh.
tax-free vehicle. Yeah.
I don't want to worry about the Dow Jones Industrial every morning, and I don't want to have to listen to what Congress is doing every morning. I don't want that to
Yeah.
drive the quality of my day.
Yeah, because it's going to affect your sleep and your anxiety levels. So here's probably the biggest financial assumption. Go ahead.
Okay, you go ahead because I've got another one, but you go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to go with the biggest myth or misconception that I used to believe is that I'm going to spend much less in retirement.
Oh,
No,
yes,
I know
Tony.
for some people, everybody's different and it depends on your situation. Maybe that's going to be true. But I know for me, now I know that is definitely not true. Number one, I don't want to take a pay cut in retirement, and I don't think anybody does. Do you want to you want to continue your same lifestyle in retirement, or do you want to all of a sudden have to live way more frugally in retirement? Well, I'd rather keep the same level of, I'd rather be able to go out to eat when I want to eat, when I want to, and take trips with my family. But like we do now, a once a year vacation or more. Some people want to spend more money in retirement, right?
Well, you just made me think of a story, Tony. So when my dad retired, he was one of those people that he was done. He was a nurse and he was just fed up with the politics and he just wanted to be left alone. So he figured out with his little pension and his Social Security, like how he could retire. And he just
Hmm.
did. But then when he got retired, then guess what? He started to have some time. And he said,
Ah,
he signed up for, of all things, a welding class.
what?
Where did that come from? He was
He
a
was
nurse.
he was a nurse. He was in the medical field, and when he retired, he signed up for a welding
He
class.
signed up for a welding class. And
That's
Tony,
crazy.
it's expensive, like everything,
Oh,
right? Because then
you've
you
never
got to
told
get
me this one before. That's interesting.
then you got to get the equipment. Well, and then you need a nice shop to work in.
Oh,
And then
jeez.
you get your car or your project
Yeah.
that you're going to work on, and that's going to take money. And so all of a sudden, his nice little, he was just like adamant, I'm fine, I'm good. And all of a sudden he's retired and I'm like, you're living beyond your means right now.
Yeah.
Because you did not
Especially
account for a
if he
welding
went out,
class.
yeah, if he went out and bought welding equipment, oh,
Well, of course
I
he
mean, can
did,
you
right?
imagine?
Because I got my neuroses from
Outrageous.
somewhere, right? If you're going to go
I'm
in, you're
glad
going to
you
go all
said that.
in.
I'm glad you said that, Tara, and I didn't have to point that out once again on the show. Oh, yeah.
So, if you're going to go, you're going to go all in. So I can
Yeah.
just tell you that it's a bad, dangerous assumption that when you
Yeah.
retire, you're going to need less money because that's when you finally have time and you find there's so many things to enjoy in life.
Oh,
And a lot of them are free, but they're not all free.
endless possibilities, really. I mean, and yet some people still struggle with that as well. So,
So
um,
I wanted to dive into this next topic, Tony, and I think this
okay.
this is from the book, and it's a very dangerous assumption that I think that's put out there is about insurance.
Okay.
And insurance, it's not good or bad. Insurance is a tool that plugs holes in your retirement plan. So I want
Mm,
everyone to think of the visual of, the XY graph, and you've got that bell curve. And so we start out the bell curve in life and you go up towards the top of that bell curve, and that's retirement. So you have this first part of your life where you're growing your money. And
yeah.
in that part, there's like three big challenges. When you're growing your money is you're poor, right? Because you're young.
Yep.
You are trying to save for retirement, And then you're also trying to like enjoy
Hopefully.
your life in there somewhere along the way.
Yep. Yep.
And so usually whether you're single or you're married or you have kids, you have responsibilities. And so because you're building that nest egg, if anything happens to you, what happens to the people that depend on you? Right?
Mm,
So you've got to have some kind of insurance to protect those people.
yes.
And it doesn't matter if it's term or whole life or whatever, but you need some insurance because what if something happens and you want that protection? But here's where it gets people make this dangerous assumption. A lot of people say, well, I just need insurance until I retire and then I'm good because I'm retired. I've made my nest egg. Guess what happens when you're retired? Is there's two big concerns. One is I don't want to outlive my money.
Right.
Because you retire at 60. What if you're one of those people that lives to be 90, 95?
Or like my grandfather, 100, still going.
Crazy, right? So you don't want to outlive your money. The second thing in retirement, the big unknown is medical expenses. What if you have an unplanned medical expense, or what are you going to do for long-term care? And so the thing is once you retire at 60 or 65, how easy do you think it is to qualify for insurance at that point?
Yeah, that not easy. And that actually, you brought up another big misconception right in there, and that is people out there saying, well, Medicare will cover those things. I don't need to worry about healthcare and long-term care because Medicare covers it. But that's a huge misconception and a financial assumption that people make, right?
Well, and I want people to think about this. And we talked about this a lot, Tony, when I was working in IT with the Air Force, is people confuse solutions and requirements. So a requirement is something that's there all the time. So when you always have in your life, you have a requirement, you have a hole that exists to protect against, acts of God or the unexpected. There's always a requirement to have that protection.
Yep.
The debate becomes what the solution is going to be. And
right.
So, but the thing is so when you're young, insurance will protect you from, like, if you can't work anymore. Once you retire, the insurance then takes on the job of protecting your nest egg. So let's say you have a $2 million 401k. If you get sick, do you want to have to spend the money from that 401k, or do you want some insurance in play that protects that income stream so that your money can be in the market and do its thing because it's protected?
It's what I call retirement insurance. People don't understand that they can actually insure their retirement.
And that's huge.
It's
a huge thing when you're looking holistically. It's the need for for an insurance. It has a different requirement. So when you're there, the requirement is to protect your income stream. And then the third phase, Tony, is, and I hate to be real, but I'm going to get real here for a minute, is with couples, there's going to be a second person to die.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. The first person to die is going to be okay because you're going to spend that nest egg and take care of that person, because that's what we do. We take care of the people we love.
Yeah.
And what happens if there's no insurance in place? It's that second person to die, Tony, that can face being below the poverty line and having to live on Medicare if that nest egg got spent taking care of the first person.
Yeah. And Medicaid, it'll actually have to be Medicaid at that point that we kick in if there's not enough money there.
And that may force you to have to sell your house. You may have to make, so it's that second person to die that's going to be left in the lurch. And that's the thing that part of a good financial plan is you fill in the holes. And so this assumption of, well, I don't need insurance, or I'm just going to grow my nest egg in the market and I'll live on that. Okay, well, do you have a crystal ball that you know what your medical expenses are going to be?
Yeah.
Do you know how much it's going to cost in the future? Because I would like to know.
Yeah.
I don't mean to get back on Congress again, but so this is a big fallacy that people say. They make an assumption, well, I don't need to have insurance. And I get it, because nobody likes insurance, right? Because whether it's car insurance, health insurance, any kind of insurance you buy, it's always a bet, right? You're betting that you're going to need it, and the insurance company's betting you won't. And so it's becomes this thing, but it's this big fallacy I see with a lot of people, that if you have a $2 million nest egg and you have insurance, then Tony, you have permission to spend that entire nest egg because there's insurance. If you don't have insurance and you just have that nest egg, you tell me, how much of that are you going to spend? Or are you going to make your life a little smaller because you don't want to outlive that money?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't want to take a pay cut in retirement. So,
right.
So having a plan in place is the key here. And maybe, we just have a couple of minutes left in the show. Let our listeners know how they can get a plan in place. Either if they think they've already got a plan, get a second opinion, because, a 401k isn't a plan just because you have an IRA or investments in stocks. You don't necessarily have an overall encompassing retirement plan that takes into account everything: when to file for Social Security, Medicare, healthcare costs, tax situations, other investments. So how can our listeners get that plan in place? And it's a written plan. They can actually have a plan and look and see where they're at. I think that's invaluable. It's the Sleep Well at Night plan, the SWAN plan, right?
It is, Tony. And so for the folks listening, Chris and I believe in doing that holistic plan, and the number is 719-210-4242 to set up that complimentary call. But just like you said, Tony, we look at the plan holistically. So it includes the 401k, it includes the real estate, it includes the annuities, it includes the checking account, it includes all these different pieces. Because, what I find with most people, Tony, is they have elements of the plan, but very few people have the entire plan. And so it's very important to look at the plan in its entirety. And it doesn't mean you have to change. So if one of your things is working really well, like for people who are still working, their 401k has to stay with their company. So we just keep watching that, but then we make sure all the other holes are filled, because that's what sets you up for success and then lets you be able to sleep well at night. And the thing that we do, Tony, that's different is we put it together in a binder. And so that way we have the entire plan. And then every year when we do an annual review, we go, well, here's what we thought was going to happen. What changed? And then we keep making sure that all of those different 27 things are still tracking, because life changes, right?
Yeah, sure does.
Totally unexpected things happen. And so it's really important that we look at that whole plan, and then we keep looking at it every year. And what I just keep finding, Tony, is I have so many people that come and they go, well, I've got a 401k, I'm good. And 401k is excellent, but it doesn't cover the holes. And it's the holes and the gaps that are going to get you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you there's probably going to be some kind of unexpected medical things. Life just happens. And
life happens. Yeah.
It's just,
to all of us. Yeah. None of us are exempt from that.
Well, and you're just reminding me of one of my clients. When she came to me, she's like, my house is paid off. My car is paid off. I don't have any dependents. I'm going to live on $35,000 a year. And Tony, literally like 2 years later, she's like, I need $25,000 to replace the windows in my house. And I'm like, didn't you tell me you were going to live on $35,000 a year?
Yeah.
And of course, we didn't plan it like that. We changed it, but there's a disconnect for people where they think about how much they need and how much things really cost.
Yeah.
What does that
replacing all your window? Yeah, the price is right. The price is wrong, Bob, is the problem. Replacing all the windows in your house could cost $34,000. I mean, it depends on the house and the windows you get, if they're decent. But
it doesn't seem like it should cost that much, but you're like, that's how much you thought you were going to live on for the entire year.
Yeah. So, Tara, we're out of time. Give that phone number and web address one more time before we go.
Sure, Tony. The number is 719-210-4242. It's 719-210-4242. And it's NolanFinancialPartners.com. Connect with us to set up this complimentary appointment so we can set you on your way for success.
All right. Great show. And that does it for today's episode of Nolan Financial Radio.
Join us again for the next episode of Nolan Financial Radio. Take care, and we'll talk with you next time.